Have you ever noticed that the moment you try to catch yourself being alive, something slips away? It's a very strange thing. You are here, breathing, seeing, hearing, feeling the weight of your body, the movement of thought, the simple fact of being. And then suddenly the mind asks, what is consciousness? And in that very question, something tightens. A distance appears. It is as if you were trying to turn around fast enough to catch yourself in the act of existing. But consciousness is not that kind of thing. It is not an object sitting somewhere inside you, waiting to be discovered like a coin under the floorboards. It is not a hidden mechanism in the head. It is much more like light, by means of which everything else is seen, but which becomes strangely hard to grasp the moment you stare directly at it. And that is why trying too hard to understand consciousness often pulls you away from it. It reminds me of a child kneeling beside a still pond, looking at the reflection of the moon. The moon is there, perfectly clear, floating in the dark water. But the moment the child reaches out to grab it, the whole surface breaks into ripples. The image shatters. He tries again, more carefully this time, but again the same thing happens. His effort to seize the reflection is exactly what disturbs it. That is what the mind does with consciousness. The mind says, I must understand this. I must know what it is that knows. And at once it creates a split. There seems to be a watcher on one side and the thing being watched on the other. A thinker and a thought. A self looking at awareness as if awareness were separate from the self. But that split is the mischief. That is where the confusion begins. Because you do not stand outside consciousness and inspect it from a safe distance. You are never outside it. Even your attempt to think about it is happening within it. Every question, every doubt, every theory, every effort to define what awareness is, all of that is appearing in the very thing you are trying to explain. So the mind gets into a rather comic situation. It becomes like a man standing in the middle of a symphony asking, yes, but where exactly is the music? He sees the violins, the conductor, the bows moving, the air vibrating. But because he cannot find the music as one separate object among the instruments, he thinks it is missing. And all the while, the music is surrounding him. So with consciousness. We miss it not because it is far away, but because it is too near, too obvious, too intimate. It is here before the question begins. It is the hearing of these words, the feeling in your chest, the color before your eyes, the little drift of thought passing through. It is all of that. Not hiding behind experience, but shining as experience. And yet the mind does not like this simplicity. It wants something it can pin down, a definition, a conclusion, something it can put in a box and say, there, now I understand. But consciousness is not a specimen. It is more like music or dancing or flowing water. You cannot really understand a river by filling buckets and carrying them home. The river is the flowing, and so are you. This is why so much inner tension comes from trying to stand apart from life and supervise it. We begin watching ourselves all the time. Am I present enough? Am I aware enough? Am I really living this moment? And that inner commentary creates the very distance it complains about. It is like asking, in the middle of laughter, but is this authentic laughter? The question kills the thing. There is a difference, you see, between awareness and self-consciousness. Awareness is open, spacious, effortless. It is like the sky. Self-consciousness, in the anxious sense, is awareness twisted back on itself. It is the feeling of being on stage before an audience called me, constantly checking, judging, measuring, interfering. We all know this feeling. A child sings freely until someone says, "Now sing correctly," and suddenly the song becomes stiff. A man walks perfectly well until he starts thinking about how he moves his legs. Then he becomes awkward. The old story says the centipede was asked how it managed all those feet, and after thinking about it, it could no longer walk. That is the danger of the wrong kind of introspection. Life is happening beautifully on its own, and then thought steps in and says, "Let me improve this by standing in the way." But consciousness does not need your help in order to be consciousness. You do not make an effort to hear a bird. You do not force the color blue to appear. You do not manufacture the sensation of warmth or the sound of rain. These things simply arrive, and awareness is already there with them. The whole show is already in motion before the commentator clears his throat. Now, I am not saying thought is useless. Thought is a marvelous tool. Language is useful. Concepts are useful. But they are maps, not the countryside. And the trouble begins when we mistake the map for the living world. We start believing that by naming a mystery, we have somehow mastered it. We haven't. We have only wrapped it in words. And the great illusion behind all this is the idea that inside you, there is a little manager, a separate I, standing behind the eyes, directing everything, owning awareness, making experience happen. But if you look for this little manager carefully, what do you actually find? More thoughts, more images, more sensations, more passing impressions. The one who seems to be in control turns out to be just another appearance in the field, like a wave claiming ownership of the ocean. And that can feel unsettling, because we are so used to identifying with the voice in the head. But the voice is not the whole of you. It is something appearing in you, a sound, a movement, a ripple. And once you begin to see that, something softens. The need to solve yourself starts to relax, because perhaps life is not a problem to be solved at all. Perhaps it is much more like a mystery to be lived. There are moments when you already know this, though perhaps you do not call it by that name. You are watching evening light move across a wall, or listening to rain at night, or walking beneath trees with no particular destination. And for a moment, there is no observer standing apart, no one asking whether this is the right experience, no one trying to improve it. There is just the moment, clear, undivided, alive. And afterward, thought may come back and say, "Ah, that was presence, that was consciousness." But during the moment itself, there was no such commentary. There was only the thing itself. That is why real clarity is often closer to self-forgetfulness than to self-analysis. Not becoming dull, not becoming blank. Quite the opposite. Becoming so fully here that the usual split between me and my experience simply isn't there. The waves are moving. The wind is blowing. The tea is warm. The room is humming. Breath is rising and falling. And somehow, that is enough. More than enough. So if you ask me what it means to understand consciousness, I would say it may not mean getting hold of it at all. It may mean seeing the futility of trying to hold it. It may mean noticing the grasping itself, the inward leaning, the subtle tension, the demand that life explain itself in a form the mind can own, and then letting that whole effort grow quiet. Not by force, never by force. You cannot relax by clenching. You cannot fall asleep by command. You cannot float if you panic and thrash at the water. In the same way, you cannot come into intimacy with consciousness by attacking it with analysis. You come into intimacy with it the way your eyes adjust to darkness, by ceasing to demand immediate clarity on your own terms. And then there is room. Room for thought to be thought. Room for sadness to be sadness. Room for joy to be joy. Room even for confusion to be confusion. Because confusion, too, appears in awareness. Even the feeling of being lost is something shining clearly enough to be known. The clouds do not damage the sky. They pass through it. And thoughts, however tangled, do not stain awareness itself. They are weather. Once this is seen, even a little, a certain gentleness enters life. You stop treating your own mind as an enemy. You stop putting awareness on trial. You stop asking existence to present its credentials. And instead, there is a quieter kind of amazement. Very simple, very human. The hum of a room, the sound between words, the warmth of a cup in your hands, the strange, tender fact that anything at all is appearing. And perhaps that is enough understanding for one lifetime. Not a grand conclusion, not a final theory, not a little flag planted on the summit of certainty. Just this calm intimacy with what is. The recognition that consciousness was never missing, only overlooked. Not because it was hidden, but because you were trying to look at it as if it were something other than the very light of your life. So maybe the final understanding is not a statement, but a release. To stop reaching, to stop dividing, to stop asking awareness to become an object, and simply to be here, where it has always been, quietly shining through everything, impossible to hold, impossible to improve, and complete before the mind says a word.